What's good, YouTube? In this video we'll be taking a look at how to save and optimize battery life on the Samsung S22 Ultra Part 1. If you like this kind of content, leave a message down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching. So the S22 Ultra has the largest screen out of Samsung's S22 series lines of phones, and it's packed with features and other things that really do make it a great phone. But all of these features can be very draining on battery life, and if you're not careful on how you use the phone, you might find yourself losing battery life a lot faster than you anticipated. The first area that we'll take a look at will be the display, which is probably one of the most easiest things to manage and see where the battery is getting drained from. So the first thing you want to check out is the brightness of your display. The S22 Ultra can get actually very bright, and even at the lower brightness settings, I find my phone to be perfectly readable. This being said, I do like to have my brightness slider at the lower ends of the phone, as it's actually quite unbearably bright if the brightness slider is towards the more farther edges of high brightness. So one of the easiest ways that you can, of course, conserve battery life is keeping the brightness levels at the lower end of the spectrum. You're not really missing out on much unless you're reading the phone outdoors or you really like an ultra bright display, as most of the phone's features, I find at least, are perfectly readable on the lower ends of the brightness spectrum. If you do find yourself at the higher end of the brightness slider, you might want to make sure that extra brightness is actually turned off. You could find this in the settings and display. Extra brightness will actually increase the maximum brightness of the brightness slider, and as you can see here, there's a little red portion that would correspond to the extra brightness portion. If you have this turned off, you won't be able to increase it to extra brightness and even use your battery even more with the extra brightness turned on. So if you are one of those people that like to have their brightness maxed out but want to try to conserve a little bit of battery life, you might want to make sure that extra brightness is turned off. Next, of course, is adaptive brightness. This, depending on your usage, will either help or hinder your battery life. Adaptive brightness will automatically adjust the tone and brightness of the S22 Ultra screen depending on the sensor readouts of what kind of lighting environment you're in. So if you're in a darker environment, adaptive brightness will increase the brightness of the S22 Ultra screen to make it a little bit more readable. I generally like to have adaptive brightness off, and while I think that adaptive brightness really does indeed make the screen a lot more readable depending on the lighting conditions, if you're shooting for battery life, then I like to have total control over the brightness of my screen. Next, in terms of display settings, you might want to set your phone to dark mode. Dark mode, of course, will make the display a lot darker, and there's less portions of the display that have to be lit by the S22 screen. With dark mode turned on, you can conserve battery life, as the S22 doesn't have to drain as much battery to make sure that the light areas of the screen are lit. The next display setting that you might want to keep an eye on to try to conserve battery life is the screen resolution. The Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra actually has 3 different screen resolutions that are available to you. These are HD, which is 1544 by 720, FHD, which is enabled out of the box at 2316 by 1080, and WQHD, which is 3088 by 1440. If you don't mind the little bit lower resolution display, HD Plus will conserve the most battery life, as it's utilizing less pixels in order to display whatever your readout is on screen. You actually get a warning every time you try to turn on WQHD that this will have the sharpest visuals but will use the most battery. I generally like to have it on FHD, as one of the major reasons I think that the S22 is priced the way it is because of the screen and the resolution. But if you're really gearing towards conserving battery life, you can turn it on to HD+. The next display setting that you might want to keep an eye on to conserve battery life is the screen timeout. This is a classic feature, so if you are someone that really wants to prioritize battery, you can set this screen timeout to a much shorter length. I generally like to have it on 2 minutes, but if I'm thinking that I'll have a long day without a charge, or might be going on a longer trip where I won't have access to a charger, I might set the screen timeout between 15 and 30 seconds, just to make sure that the extremely bright display on the S22 Ultra isn't draining battery life unnecessarily. The next display setting that you might want to take a look at to conserve battery life is screensaver. Screensaver, of course, will show various screensavers when your screen turns off. So this means if you have your screen set to turn off at every 10 seconds, the screensaver will actually turn on, and it won't actually be able to conserve battery life with the screen turned off. There's a few screensavers that are available, which is colors and photo frame, and if you're really looking to prioritize every morsel of battery life, you might want to think about turning the screensaver off. So those are the main display settings that I like to be able to tweak in order to conserve battery life. Overall, I do find that if I set the screen timeout to 10 or 30 seconds, that the battery life does extend a little bit longer over the course of 1 or 2 days. It's actually quite noticeable, actually. The other major one is making sure that my brightness isn't turned up too high, as with adaptive brightness turned on, I found that the brightness slider was increased somewhat significantly over the course of the day, even if I didn't need the extra brightness. So if you want to make sure that you have enough battery life to last maybe 1 or 2 days without going on a charge on the S22 Ultra, you want to make sure that the brightness slider is kept at the lowest possible setting where you can read the display. It's quite surprising, as the S22 Ultra's brightness, even when set to the lower end of the brightness slider, is still quite readable. This is probably a testament to the high resolution screen and the clarity of the screen on the S22 Ultra, as I found that I was able to operate the phone at much lower brightness settings than some of the other flagship phones that are available, including the Apple iPhone. So there you have it, everyone, some of the display settings in part 1 of this series on how to conserve battery life on the S22 Ultra. If you found this kind of video helpful, or if you have any other display tips or habits that you have for your S22 Ultra, leave a message down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.